Happy Friday. Hello. Hi, hello. How are you? Mogul mail? Hmm. Oh, hi, hello. How are you? Hi, puppy. Hi. Look at that waggy tail. Wag, wag, wag. That deserves a treat. Yes, it does. Wow. It's Friday. It's 7 o'clock where I am. It's February the 25th. February. Do you pronounce the first R? February. Farmos doesn't. Well, maybe you should. Have you considered that? Hmm? Yes, you've considered it, and no, you're good. I gotcha. Good evening, Sharkies. Hello. What about you? Do you pronounce the first R in February? 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 Or do you just say February? February? R seems like kind of a weird letter to be silent. I don't think you usually get silent R's. The K is silent. How sometimes you say February or February, February, February. Sometimes you say that. That's that's a weird thing to say. You're weird. Just just as many R's as you can fit in the word. February. Nope. Said it for the first time just now. Okay. Oh, look at that boy in his bed. That's nice. You comfy? You should be. It was difficult to say. So, how was your week? How are you doing? I'm starting to get a little tired for the evening. Kung Fu was good yesterday. Um, had more energy for that than I expected to, because I was feeling kind of off ahead of time, and so I was like, oh, I'm gonna get there, and I'm not gonna be able to do very much. But once I got there, I felt good and did lots of practice. Went through 3 different sets, and then a bunch of bag work and practicing various punches and things, and slaps. Practiced some slaps. Mr. Sharky worked your day for the week. Went fairly well. Took this guy out for a walk about the neighborhood today, and took Farmhouse to physio, and did a little bit of extra driving to get some food for the pup. If I move back slightly, it'll be easier to see him. Yeah, that's better. Hello, Lilyfae! Hello! How are you? How was your week? Happy Friday. Yeah, Farmhouse is having a rough physio day today. Mrs. made buns. She sent a picture. Wait a second. Sending me a picture of buns. I don't know. Oh boy. Fancy. Well, look at those. It's hard to maybe, I don't know if they're showing up very well on my screen. It's hard to oh, there they're adjusted. Look at those like cream buns. Yeah. Oh, looks very nice. Which one is mine? I would like the middle left one. Or the middle right one. Either the middle side ones. I'd like if you could just bring that over real quick. That would be good. Well, I'm out of focus. Camera is too busy thinking about those buns. I'm back here. Hello, focus up over here, please. Look at my lovely face. Oh. Oh. Oh, 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 there it is. That worked. Look at the lovely puppy. They're traditional Swedish buns called semla. They're yeast buns with whipped cream in them. Half also have jam, and the other half all have marzipan / almond. Ooh. We, before we went out to Chilliwack for the weekend, we stopped in at the new Asian specialty food place that's opened up over at Market Crossing. It's called Sun Given Foods. Just looking for random snacks and things. I think I talked about it a little bit before. That's where I got these, which I've eaten most of. But one of the things we got was this like Chinese almond dessert, which was just like a little milk jug. We got almond and we got black sesame, two of them. They look like little black milk or little plastic milk jugs of some kind of liquid. And the almond dessert basically tasted like liquid marzipan. A little gritty, but it was good. I enjoyed it. Not everyone liked it. I enjoyed it, but some of our friends didn't. The black sesame one we tried yesterday. Still have some of it in the fridge. I didn't enjoy that one as much. It was more bitter, like a little bit burnt kind of flavor to it. Not as sweet. So I didn't like the flavor of it as much. But the almond one basically just tasted like liquid marzipan because, oh yeah, I wonder why. But one of our friends that didn't enjoy it too much also doesn't really like marzipan, so that might have something to do with it. And weird little bun snack things. What are they called again? Omaida egg ball biscuit. Semla is traditional in pre-Mardi Gras season. Took a class on how to make them a few years ago, but this was your first time making them completely from scratch. Ooh. Have you eaten them yet? Have you found out if they turned out? They look good. Oh. Did you hear me having a snack? Wag, 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 wag. You already got a treat. Gotta have have the deliciousness before Lent. Oh. So. Whoopah. Queen of Sorcery. Dinner first. Sometimes it's good to have dessert first, but, you know, only sometimes. I don't think it's an every time thing for me. Oh, look at him. He's too cute. You're too cute. I don't know why you're giving me that look, though. So we are at Chapter 9 in Queen of Sorcery. Chapter 8 was kind of fun. A lot happened, really. We had a bit of a conversation with Hatar, where he gave us some background on why he hates Murgos. We had a conversation between Mr. Wolf and Sir Mandorallen about the Erendish national insanity, their constant warring. And Mr. Wolf said, you know, if it's going to be a problem, I'll just put a stop to it myself. Mandorallen was not entirely believing that that would be possible, but Mr. Wolf seemed pretty confident. And then they reached the Great Erendish Fair, which was a vast city of brightly colored tents. I think at the northern tip of the Erendish Plain. That's what it looks like on the map. The Plain of Erendia. What's it actually called? Doesn't really name the plain, but yeah, the Great Erendish Fair. And Silk went about doing some business, buying, selling, and trading, leaving a vast amount of woeful merchants in his wake, only to be somewhat thwarted by a Reven merchant who traded him a pretty blown glass. Look at that pup. Look at him. Doing a lay down. Blown glass vial, I think, or jar or something, with some kind of perfume inside, and Silk did not know what it was worth. So he didn't know whether or not he had really won or lost in that trade. And he was pretty upset about that. An exquisitely blown glass bottle, which he had traded 2 ivory-bound books of Wasite verse to a Reven for the little bottle of perfume. So he ended up giving it to Aunt Pole, who claimed it was a princely gift, which Silk wasn't exactly thrilled to hear. Yeah, and then Garion spotted Brill lurking outside their tent after they had learned that Asherak had come into the fair with some goons in tow. So they decided to keep Brill occupied watching them, try and keep him interested by basically continually going in and out of the tent so that he would stay and watch them rather than going and reporting their location to Asherak. And then they slipped out the back of the tent in the night and made their way out of the Erendish Fair. And where we left them, we were hitting the teen angst alarm because Garion was feeling lonely and sad in the dark. Well, he didn't say sad. He said just a lonely feeling. And that's where we're at the beginning of Chapter 9, on page 103 out of 322. So we're just about a third of the way through the book, just a couple pages shy. We will pass the 1/3 mark in tonight's stream. So why don't we do that? Why don't we pass that 1/3 mark? Chapter 9 goes from 103 to 114. The wind picked up again shortly before dawn, and was blowing briskly by the time the sky over the low foothills to the east began to lighten. Garion was numb with exhaustion by then, and his mind had drifted into an almost dreamlike trance. I can imagine riding on a horse all night in the wind and cold through to the morning. I've worked all night before, but that'd be really tiring, riding a horse all night long. Especially after having been up all day, because he was up all day doing all kinds of things. So that would be very tiring. I guess, you're sitting at least, but you're moving the whole time. His mind had drifted into an almost dreamlike trance. The faces of his companions all seemed strange to him as the pale light began to grow stronger. At times, he even forgot why they rode. He seemed caught in a company of grim-faced strangers, pounding along a road to nowhere through a bleak, featureless landscape, with their wind-whipped cloaks flying dark behind them, like the clouds scudding low and dirty overhead. Scudding. We talked about scudding last time. A peculiar idea began to take hold of him. The strangers were somehow his captors, and they were taking him away from his real friends. Oh boy. The idea seemed to grow stronger the farther they rode, and he began to be afraid. Suddenly, without knowing why, he wheeled his horse and broke away, plunging off the side of the road and across the open field beside it. "Garion!" a woman's voice called sharply from behind, but he set his heels to his horse's flanks and sped even faster across the rough field. One of them was chasing him, a frightening man in black leather, with a shaved head and a dark lock at his crown flowing behind him in the wind. In a panic, Garion kicked at his horse, trying to make the beast run even faster, but the fearsome rider behind him closed the gap quickly and seized the reins from his hands. "What are you doing?" he demanded harshly. Garion stared at him, unable to answer. Then the woman in the blue cloak was there, and the others not far behind her. She dismounted quickly and stood looking at him with a stern face. She was tall for a woman, and her face was cold and imperious. Her hair was very dark, and there was a single white lock at her brow. Garion trembled. The woman made him terribly afraid. "Get down off that horse," she commanded. "Gently, Paul," a silvery-haired old man with an evil face said. A huge, red-bearded giant rode closer, threatening, and Garion, almost sobbing with fright, slid down from his horse. "Come here," the woman ordered. Falteringly, Garion approached her. "Give me your hand," she said. Hesitantly, he lifted his hand, and she took his wrist firmly. She opened his fingers to reveal the ugly mark on his palm that he seemed to always have hated, and then put his hand against the white lock in her hair. "Aunt Pole!" he gasped. the nightmare suddenly dropping away. She put her arms about him tightly and held him for some time. Strangely, he was not even embarrassed by that display of affection in front of the others. "This is serious, father," she told Mr. Wolf. "What happened, Garion?" Wolf asked, his voice calm. "I don't know," Garion replied. "It was as if I didn't know any of you, and you were my enemies, and all I wanted to do was run away to try to get back to my real friends." "Are you still wearing the amulet I gave you?" "Yes." "Have you had it off at any time since I gave it to you?" "Just once," Garion admitted, "when I took a bath in the Tolnedron hostel." Wolf sighed. "You can't take it off," he said. "Not ever. Not for any reason. Take it out from under your tunic." Garion drew out the silver pendant with a strange design on it. The old man took a medallion out from under his own tunic. It was very bright, and there was upon it the figure of a standing wolf, so lifelike that it looked almost ready to lope away. Aunt Pole, her one arm still about Garion's shoulders, drew a similar amulet out of her bodice. Upon the disc of her medallion was the figure of an owl. Yeah, the wolf school and the owl school. And the puppy school. Upon the disc of her medallion was the figure of an owl. "Hold it in your right hand, dear," she instructed, firmly closing Garion's fingers over the pendant. Then, holding her amulet in her own right hand, she placed her left hand over his closed fist. Wolf, also holding his talisman, put his hand on theirs. Garion's palm began to tingle, as if the pendant were suddenly alive. There's monsters nearby. Mr. Wolf and Aunt Pole looked at each other for a long moment, and the tingling in Garion's hand suddenly became very strong. His mind seemed to open, and strange things flickered before his eyes. He saw a round room, very high up somewhere. A fire burned, but there was no wood in it. At a table, there was seated an old man who looked somewhat like Mr. Wolf, but obviously was someone else. He seemed to be looking directly at Garion, and his eyes were kindly, even affectionate. Garion was suddenly overwhelmed with a consuming love for the old man. "That should be enough," Wolf judged, releasing Garion's hand. "Who was the old man?" Garion asked. "My master," Wolf replied. "What happened?" Dernick asked, his face concerned. "It's probably better not to talk about it," Aunt Pole said. "Do you think you could build a fire? It's time for breakfast." "There are some trees over there where we can get out of the wind," Dernick suggested. They all remounted and rode toward the trees. After they had eaten, they sat by the small fire for a while. They were tired, and none of them felt quite up to facing the blustery morning again. Was this Winnie the Pooh? Garion felt particularly exhausted, and he wished that he were young enough to sit close beside Aunt Pole, and perhaps to put his head in her lap and sleep as he had done when he was very young. The strange thing that had happened had made him feel very much alone, and more than a little frightened. "Dernick," he said, more to drive the mood away than out of any real curiosity, "what sort of bird is that?" He pointed. "A raven, I think," Dernick answered, looking at the birds circling above them. I thought so too, Garion said. But they don't usually circle, do they? Dernick frowned. Maybe it's watching something on the ground. How long has it been up there? Wolf asked, squinting up at the large bird. I think I first saw it when we were crossing the field, Garion told him. Mr. Wolf glanced over at Aunt Pole. What do you think? Sharky say there's a Murgo pretending to be a rain cloud in order to eavesdrop on them. Almost. You were a couple of moments early there with that guess. She looked up from one of Garion's stockings she had been mending. I'll see. Her face took on a strange, probing expression. Garion felt a peculiar tingling again. On an impulse, he tried to push his own mind out toward the bird. Garion, Aunt Pole said, without looking at him, stop that. I'm sorry, he apologized quickly, and pulled his mind back where it belonged. Well, that's something new there, isn't it? I don't think Garion's done anything at all like that before. Just casually dropped in here. Mr. Wolf looked at him with a strange expression, then winked at him. It's Chamdar, Aunt Pole announced calmly. Chamdar was the Grulim priest who appeared to them at that rocky outcropping in the forest when they were being attacked by Algroths. The one who was sending his shadow, and then Mr. Wolf sent it away back. Yeah, like Farmo says, the shadow guy. She carefully pushed her needle into the stocking and set it aside. Then she stood up and shook off her blue cloak. What have you got in mind? Wolf asked. I think I'll go have a little chat with him, she replied, flexing her fingers like talons. You'd never catch him, Wolf told her. Your feathers are too soft for this kind of wind. There's an easier way. The old man swept the windy sky with a searching gaze. Over there, he pointed at a barely visible speck above the hills to the west. You'd better do it, Pole. I don't get along with birds. Of course, Father, she agreed. She looked intently at the speck. The Sharkies ask, why are corvids almost always bad guys or ill omens? I love corvids. Not, well, you did say almost always, but I mean, there's, what are their names? Munir and, or Munin and Odin's birds, right? Sometimes they're not. But yes, I know what you mean. I think it's the, black bird equals bad. And the way they sound is kind of ominous sometimes, right? The, like, raspy... Ah! Ah! Munin and Hagen? Hagen? Really? It doesn't... And I'm not sure if it's Munin or Moonin or something else. Farmos blames Poe. I think it predates Poe. I think they've been ill omens for probably a long time. Not to mention, sometimes they are just mean, right? Sometimes they attack people. If it's nesting season and you're just walking in the wrong place at the wrong time, they'll fight you. You're just minding your own business, and suddenly you got a crow swooping at you. I do agree they're neat, and they're very smart, and there's a lot of, interesting things about them. But I don't think it's that unusual that they're seen as ill omens. You ever see one on, like, a really gray day? It's windy and gross out, and there's a raven or a crow, and it's just, I don't know, it's a little creepy. But Matthew, someone should introduce seagulls or geese as ill omen. Seagulls are too stupid, and geese are too big. And, like, I don't know. Geese, I feel like they're too big. Plus, there's a lot of different types of geese, right? Basically for corvids, you've got what, like ravens and crows, really. Like they all look similar. Geese, there's so many varieties. There was a seagull as a soul manor in a Terry Pratchett book. Soul messenger. I don't remember that one. Or pigeons. Okay. All right. Aunt Pole was focusing on a speck in the distance. She looked intently at the speck, and Garion felt the tingle as she sent her mind out again. The speck began to circle, rising higher and higher until it disappeared. The raven did not see the plummeting eagle until the last instant, just before the larger bird's talons struck. There was a sudden puff of black feathers, and the raven, screeching with fright, flapped wildly away with the eagle in pursuit. "Nicely done, Pole," Wolf approved. "It will give him something to think about," she smiled. "Don't stare, Dernick." Dernick was gaping at her, his mouth open. "How did you do that?" "Do you really want to know?" she asked. Dernick shuddered and looked away quickly. "I think that just about settles it," Wolf said. "Disguises are probably useless now. I'm not sure what Chamdar's up to, but he's going to be watching us every step of the way. We might as well arm ourselves and ride straight to Vomimbre." "Aren't we going to follow the trail anymore?" Barak asked. "The trail goes south," Wolf replied. "I can pick it up again once we cross over into Tol Nidra. But first, I want to stop by and have a word with King Corodulan. There are some things he needs to know." "Corodulan?" Dernick looked puzzled. "Wasn't that the name of the first Arendish king? It seems to me somebody told me that once." "All Arendish kings are named Corodulan," Silk told him, "and the queens are all named Maya Serena. It's all Maya Serana? Maya Serana? Maya Serana. Mayasserana. Maya Serana. It's part of the fiction the royal family here maintains to keep the kingdom from flying apart. They have to marry as closely within the bloodline as possible to maintain the illusion of the unification of the houses of Mimbre and Asturia. It makes them all a bit sickly, but there's no help for it, considering the peculiar nature of Arendish politics. "All right, Silk," Aunt Pole said reprovingly. Sharkies were hoping that was just an avatar of Chamdar in the form of a raven, rather than an actual raven possessed. Royalty are unimaginative in this world. All kings named one thing, all raven leaders named Brand. Incest. Go figure. Yeah, well, all of the Reven warders are named Brand, but that is Did we get an... I don't want to give more information than we've gotten. Was that explained why all Reven Warders are named Brand? But there is one reason for that. We've just been given a different reason for Korodulin and Maya Serana. But the Sendars, they don't have anything like that. The Chereks, the Drasnians, the Tolnedrins. The Tolnedrins are something else entirely. We'll get more into that. Although, just wait until we get to Nyissa. Sharkies reminds me of the Monty Python Bruce. Just to keep it clear. Is that right, Bruce? Mandorallen looked thoughtful. Could it be that this Chamdar, who so dogs our steps, is one of great substance in the dark society of the Grolims? He asked. He'd like to be, Wolf answered. Zadar and Ktuchik. What's up? C-T-U-C-H-I-K. Ktuchik? 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 I think I just said the same thing 3 times, trying to say something different each time. Ktuchik? Ktuchik? Kt. Ugh. Zadar and Ktuchik are Torak's disciples, and Chamdar wants to be one as well. He's always been Ktuchik's agent, but he may believe that this is his chance to move up in the Grolim hierarchy. Ktuchik's very old. You're one to talk. And he spends all his time in the temple of Torak at Rakthol. Maybe Chamdar thinks it's time that someone else became high priest. Is Torak's body at Rakthol? Silk asked quickly. Mr. Wolf shrugged. Nobody knows for sure, but I doubt it. After Zadar carried him away from the battlefield at Vomimbre, I don't think he'd have just handed him over to Ktuchik. He could be in Meloria, or somewhere in the southern reaches of Ctholmergos. It's hard to say. But, at the moment, Chamdar's the one we have to worry about, Silk concluded. Not if we keep moving, Wolf told him. We'd better get moving then, Barak said, standing up. By mid-morning, the heavy clouds had begun to break up, and patches of blue sky showed here and there. Enormous pillars of sunlight stalked ponderously across the rolling fields that waited, damp and expectant, for the first touches of spring. That almost sounded like a Discworld type of thing. Almost, not quite. It didn't make the sunlight sound lazy enough. Or like, yeah. With Mandorallen in the lead, they had ridden hard and had covered a good 6 leagues. Finally, they slowed to a walk to allow their steaming horses to rest. Armo says their world might actually be round. I don't see why not. How much farther... Well, there's a typo here. It says how much farther. There's only one R in the word. How much farther is it to Vomimbre? How much farther is it to Vomimbre, grandfather? Garion asked, pulling his horse in beside Mr. Wolf. Like grandfather-grandson thing between them now is so cute. 60 leagues at least, Wolf answered. Probably closer to 80. That's a long way, Garion winced as he shifted in his saddle. Yes. I'm sorry I ran away like that back there. Garion apologized. It wasn't your fault. Chamdar was playing games. Why did he pick me? Couldn't he have done the same thing to Dernick or Barak? Mr. Wolf looked at him. You're younger, more susceptible. All right, that's the first kind of explanation we've gotten. But then, that's not really it, is it? Garion accused. No, Wolf admitted. Not really, but it's an answer, of sorts. This is another one of those things you aren't going to tell me, isn't it? I suppose you could say that, Wolf answered blandly. We almost got an explanation, but it was a lie. At least we got told immediately that it was a lie. Better than it getting, retconned later or something. Garion sulked about that for a while. Farmo says it's an answer. It's not a true answer, but it is one. Did I disturb you, puppy, with my teen angst? It's okay, don't worry. It's just angst. It's okay. Garion sulked about that for a while, but Mr. Wolf rode on, seemingly unconcerned by the boy's reproachful silence. Puppy has no patience for angst, and Wolf gives no hex about angst. They stopped that night at a Tolnedran hostel, which, like all of them, was plain, adequate, and expensive. The next morning, the sky had... Puppy has spent some time with, my nibbling. They took care of him for a bit. So he's been around one for a little while at least. The next morning, the sky had cleared, except for billowy patches of white cloud, scampering before the brisk wind. Oh, they're scampering, not scudding. The sight of the sun made them all feel better, and there was even some bantering between Silk and Barak as they rode along. Something Garion hadn't heard in all the weeks they'd spent traveling under the gloomy skies of northern Erendia. Mandorallen, however, scarcely spoke that morning, and his face grew more somber with each passing mile. He was not wearing his armor, but instead a mail suit. He's not wearing his armor, he's still wearing mail. Instead, a mail suit and a deep blue surcoat. His head was bare, and the wind tugged at his curly hair. On a nearby hilltop, a bleak-looking castle brooded down at them as they passed, its grim walls. I just can't stop seeing that word now. Its grim walls high and haughty-looking. Mandorallen seemed to avoid looking at it, and his face became even more melancholy. Building angst, says Farmhouse. Garion found it difficult to make up his mind about Mandorallen. He was honest enough with himself to admit that much of his thinking was still clouded by Leldoran's prejudices. He didn't really want to like Mandorallen, but aside from the habitual gloominess which seemed characteristic of all Erins, and the studied and involuted archaism of the man's speech, and his towering self-confidence, there seemed little to actually dislike. Besides this thing and that thing, and the other thing, other than those things, there's not that much to dislike. Oh, bye-bye, puppy.
A half-league along the road from the castle, a ruin sat at the top of a long rise. It was not much more than a single wall, with a high archway in the center and broken columns on either side. Near the ruin, a woman sat on horseback, her dark red cape flowing in the wind. Without a word, almost without seeming to think about it, Mandorallen turned his warhorse from the road and cantered up the rise toward the woman, who watched his approach without any seeming surprise, but also with no particular pleasure.
"Where's he going?"
Barak asked.
"She's an acquaintance of his,"
Mr. Wolf said dryly.
"Are we supposed to wait for him?"
"He can catch up with us,"
Wolf replied. Mandorallen had stopped his horse near the woman and dismounted. He bowed to her and held out his hands to help her down from her horse. They walked together toward the ruin, not touching, but walking very close to each other. They stopped beneath the archway and talked. Behind the ruin, clouds raced in the windy sky, and their enormous shadows swept uncaring across the mournful fields of Erendia.
"We should have taken a different route," Wolf said. "I wasn't thinking, I guess."
"Is there some problem?" Dernick asked.
"Nothing unusual, in Erendia," Wolf answered. "I suppose it's my fault. Sometimes I forget the kinds of things that can happen to young people."
"Don't be cryptic, Father," Aunt Pole told him. "It's very irritating. Is this something we should know about?" Sharky say, "Acquaintance. They took the route by Makeout Point. Well, let's find out about that." Wolf shrugged.
"It isn't any secret," he replied. "Half of Erendia knows about it. A whole generation of Erendish virgins cry themselves to sleep every night over it."
"Father," Aunt Pole snapped exasperatedly.
"All right," Wolf said. "When Mandorallen was about Garion's age, he showed a great deal of promise. Strong, courageous, not too bright, the qualities that make a good knight. His father asked me for advice, and I made arrangements for the young man to live for a while with the Baron of Vaux-Ebor. That's his castle back there. The Baron had an enormous reputation, and he provided Mandorallen with the kind of instruction he needed. Mandorallen and the Baron became almost like father and son, since the Baron was quite a bit older. Everything was going fine until the Baron got married. His bride, however, was much younger, about Mandorallen's age."
Bleh. "I think I see where this is going," Dernick remarked disapprovingly.
"Not exactly," Wolf disagreed. "After the honeymoon, the Baron returned to his customary nightly pursuits, and left a very bored young lady wandering around his castle. It's a situation with all kinds of interesting possibilities."
Wolf.
"Anyway, Mandorallen and the lady exchanged glances, then words, the usual sort of thing."
"It happens in Sandaria too," Dernick observed. "But I'm sure the name we have for it is different from the one they use here." His tone was critical, even offended.
"You're jumping to conclusions, Dernick,"
Wolf told him.
"Things never went any further. It might have been better if they had. Adultery isn't really all that serious,
and in time they'd have gotten bored with it. But since they both loved and respected the Baron too much to dishonor him, Mandorallen left the castle before things could get out of hand. Now they both suffer in silence. It's all very touching, but it seems like a waste of time to me. Of course, I'm older.
You're older than everyone, Father, Aunt Pole said.
You didn't have to say that, Pole.
Silk laughed sardonically. I'm glad to see that our stupendous friend at least has the bad taste to fall in love with another man's wife. Really, Silk? His nobility was beginning to get rather cloying. The little man's expression had that bitter, self-mocking cast to it Garion had first seen in Val Alorn when they had spoken with Queen Porenne. Does the Baron know about it? Dernick asked.
Naturally, Wolf replied. That's the part that makes the Arryns get all mushy inside about it. There was a knight once, stupider than most Arryns, who made a bad joke about it. The Baron promptly challenged him and ran a lance through him during the duel. Since then, very few people have found the situation humorous.
It's still disgraceful, Dernick said. Their behavior's above reproach, Dernick, Aunt Pole maintained firmly. There's no shame in it, as long as it doesn't go any further. Decent people don't allow it to happen in the first place, Dernick asserted. Dernick's being a little judgy. Sharkies say, Mister just had a bun. It was amazing. Ah, I'm jealous. Pharma says, I mean, he's old, but not like doddering or anything. He doesn't show his age. Mm-hmm.
You'll never convince her, Dernick, Mr. Wolf told the smith. Polgara spent too many years associating with the Wassite Arryns. They were as bad or worse than the Membrates. You can't wallow in that kind of sentimentality for that long without some of it rubbing off. Fortunately, it hasn't totally blotted out her good sense. She's only occasionally girlish and gushy. If you can avoid her during those seizures, it's almost as if there was nothing wrong with her.
Wow. What a burn. Speaking of Chuchi. That whole, paragraph was just a big shot at Polgara. Seizures of girliness. Karma says just because he's too old to feel anything anymore. My time was spent a little more usefully than yours, Father, Aunt Pole observed acidly. Everybody ready for this? As I remember, you spent those years carousing in the waterfront dives in Kamar. And then there was that uplifting period you spent amusing the depraved women of Maragor. I'm certain those experiences broadened your concept of morality enormously. Mr. Wolf coughed uncomfortably and looked away. Ooh! The juicy gossip's coming out.
Farmos was saying he was too old to feel anything anymore. It doesn't sound like that's necessarily the case. Behind them, Mandorallen had remounted and begun to gallop back down the hill. The lady stood in the archway with her red cloak billowing in the wind, watching him as he rode away. Paul doesn't say how long ago it was. Well, the waterfront dives part was when Paul was with the Wasite Eddings, because she says, as I remember, you spent those years, referring to the years she was with the Wasites, carousing in the waterfront dives in Kamar. And they said that was like 1,000 years ago or something, I think. Back when they were in the ruins where Garion met Leldoran for the first time. That was near the beginning of this book. So I could find that pretty easily. Um, 25 centuries. 25 centuries ago, she was with the Wasite Eddings, and Mr. Wolf was carousing in waterfront dives in Kamar. She doesn't exactly say when the uplifting period he spent amusing the depraved women of Maragor was. I don't know if that was directly after the waterfront dives of Kamar, or if that was later, or even earlier. Could have been either way. They were 5 days on the road before they reached the river Erend, the boundary between Arendia and Tolnidra. All right. So that is what? Pretty far south, isn't it? They crossed the entire plain? Yep, they are way down here now. Way down at the bottom of the map. We came from the fair up here, and they rode for days and days and days and days, and now they're down here. The weather improved as they moved farther south, and by the morning, when they reached the hill overlooking the river, it was almost warm. It was actually a little warm out today here. A little. Warmer than it has been, I guess. It was like 7 degrees. But it was sunny, and that was nice. The sun was very bright, and a few fleecy clouds raced overhead in the fresh breeze. "The high road to Vomimbre branches to the left just there," Mandorallen remarked. "Yes," Wolf said. "Let's go down into that grove near the river and make ourselves a bit more presentable. Appearances are very important in Vomimbre, and we don't want to arrive looking like vagabonds." 3 brown-robed and hooded figures stood humbly at the crossroads, their faces down and their hands held out in supplication. Mr. Wolf reined in his horse and approached them. He spoke with them briefly, and then gave each a coin. "Who are they?" Garion asked. "Monks from Mar Terin," Silk replied. "Where's that?" "It's a monastery in southeastern Tolnidra, where Maragor used to be," Silk told him. "The monks try to comfort the spirits of the Marags." Sharkies say, Mister has been keeping track of 3 traveling narratives. Somehow thinking of a grove near the river makes me think of the trees near the eastern borders of the Shire. What's the 3rd narrative? Mr. Wolf motioned to them, and they rode on past the 3 humble figures at the roadside. "They say that no Murgos have passed here in the last 2 weeks. Book based on the world of... Critical Role.
I have watched or listened to very little Critical Role. I tried to start at the beginning of it, but near the beginning the quality was really bad. Like the audio quality was actually kind of hard to listen to, and so I didn't really get past that. And not to mention the beginning wasn't really the beginning, it was just when they started recording. I think it was already a game in progress at that time. Rookie mistake. Starting at the beginning is a rookie mistake. Podcasts aren't really my thing. I just thought I'd give it a shot. The best place to start is the beginning of campaign 2. Oh, well, I should have known better. No, I shouldn't. Ahem. So they say no Murgos have passed here in the last 2 weeks. Are you sure we can believe them? Hatar asked. Probably. The monks won't lie to anybody.
Then they'll tell anybody who comes by that we've passed here?
Barak asked. Wolf nodded.
They'll answer any question anybody puts to them. That's an unsavory habit,
Barak grunted darkly. Mr. Wolf shrugged and led the way among the trees beside the river.
This ought to do,
he decided, dismounting in a grassy glade. He waited while the others climbed down from their horses.
All right,
he told them.
We're going to Vomimbre. I want you all to be careful about what you say there. Mimbrates are very touchy, and the slightest word can be taken as an insult.
I think you should wear the white robe Fulrak gave you, Father, Aunt Pole interrupted, pulling open one of the packs.
Please, Pole, Wolf said. I'm trying to explain something.
They heard you, Father. You tend to belabor things too much. She held up the white robe and looked at it critically. You should have folded it more carefully. You've wrinkled it.
I'm not going to wear that thing, he declared flatly.
Yes, you are, Father, she told him sweetly. We might have to argue about it for an hour or two, but you'll wind up wearing it in the end anyway. Why not just save yourself all the time and aggravation? So practical.
It's silly,
he complained. Lots of things are silly, Father. I know the errands better than you do. You'll get more respect if you look the part. Mandorallen and Hatar and Barak will wear their armor. Dernek and Silk and Garion can wear the doublets Fulrak gave them in Sendar. I'll wear my blue gown, and you'll wear the white robe. I insist, Father.
You what? Now listen here, Polgara.
Be still, Father, she said absently, examining Garion's blue doublet. Wolf's face darkened, and his eyes bulged dangerously. Was there something else? She asked with a level gaze. Mr. Wolf let it drop. That whole exchange there. I like how she's just like, let's just pretend that we have already argued about it for 2 hours. Let's just get past that. You're wearing it. I won. I won the theoretical argument. All right. Moving on. And I like how he's just, it's silly. Oh boy. He's as wise as they say he is, Silk observed. An hour later, they were on the high road to Vomimbre under a sunny sky. Mandorallen, once again in full armor and with a blue and silver pennon streaming from the tip of his lance, led the way with Barak in his gleaming mail shirt and black bearskin cape riding immediately behind him. At Aunt Pole's insistence, the big Cherrick had combed the tangles out of his red beard and even rebraided his hair. He did that in an hour? I don't think so. Listen, I've got some experience with this kind of thing. Look, I am pulling right now. Ugh. It takes time to comb. Oh, there's a tangle here. It takes time to comb tangles out of your hair, and they've been on the road for how long? And there's a knot. I don't know. Maybe my hair is thicker. I don't think. I mean, maybe, but they've described his hair as being pretty messy before. And I'm just saying, he combed out his hair and he rebraided his beard in under an hour. I'm gonna doubt on that one. Maybe it's a weird thing for me to be picky about, but there you have it. Maybe Barak dumped a whole bunch of oil or something in it to lube it up. I comb my hair out when it's got conditioner in it in the shower, and it still takes me quite a long time. Like, I turn off the water, and then I sit there with conditioner in my hair, combing it out, and then after that's done, the water comes back on, and I continue the shower. And it still takes time. Alright, so anyways. He combed the tangles out of his beard and he rebraided his hair. For some reason I swapped those in my head. Just trying to think of what a medieval type society would have on hand on the road, yeah. Mr. Wolf, in his white robe, rode sourly, muttering to himself, and Aunt Pole sat her horse demurely at his side in a short, fur-lined cape, and with a blue satin headdress surmounting the heavy mass of her dark hair. Garion and Dernick were ill at ease in their finery, but Silk wore his doublet and black velvet cap with a kind of exuberant flair. Surprise, surprise. Hatar's sole concession to formality had been the replacement of a ring of beaten silver for the leather thong which usually caught in his scalp lock. The serfs, and even the occasional knight they encountered along the way, stood aside and saluted respectfully. The day was warm, the road was good, and their horses were strong. By mid-afternoon, they crested a high hill overlooking the plain which sloped down to the gates of Vomimbre. And that's page 114, the end of chapter 9. It's 8:09. Let's see how long chapter 10 is. There's some stuff in chapter 10 that is quite entertaining, but it goes from page 100 and the end of 114 to page 128. So it's about 14 more pages. So I don't know. What do people think? Pharma says beard might be faster, but then braiding the hair would be slower. Bit long? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good place to stop. It is 10 after 8 now already, so. So, there were a few interesting moments in this chapter. We had Garion mucking about a little bit with his own
as Aunt Pole was trying to check out what was going on with the birds. That was interesting. There was also the bit with Chamdar. At least it seems like that mind muckery was dealt with without anything too serious taking place. Unlike, some of the last time. It didn't last so long this time. That part felt a little strange to me, in that okay, there's a couple things here that I find a little unusual. Um, First of all, previously it was Ashrak that had a link with Garion, right? The whole rider on a dark horse thing was Ashrak. But now we've also got Chamdar showing up, and maybe it was Chamdar that had a link on Garion this time and not Ashrak? Sharky say it did start a chapter in a weird way because I wondered why now. And then, yeah, that's the other thing. They got this mental link with Garion again. Nobody knows about it. And then it feels like they kind of just waste it, like, by having him just ride off. When he's clearly not going to get away from his friends. Like, it doesn't really accomplish anything, right? It just alerts everybody to the fact that Garion's mind's been messed with again, and also to the fact that they're being observed, right? Like, if that hadn't happened, maybe they wouldn't have noticed the bird flying around overhead. Maybe they would have. Maybe it was a test, say Sharkies. I don't know. It feels like a wasted effort to me, like something that was doomed to fail from the beginning. Like, that was never going to succeed. Garion was not going to get away from them, especially with Hatar there. Maybe the Murgos don't know about Hatar, but really, like, just riding away in full sight of everybody, like, it's just, like, why not wait until everyone's asleep and then muck with Garion's mind? Or maybe they could only do it because Garion was already tired from having ridden all night. Maybe his mind was weaker then, so they just took a shot at it. That's my best guess, is Garion was up riding all night, and as a result his mental defenses were lower than usual. Maybe that's why. And so it was just like, let's try now, I don't know. That's the best guess I've got, because otherwise it just feels like, just don't do anything. Wait till later, or, because now your link is undone again. Garion has been warned to not take the amulet off, so you probably aren't going to get another chance. Maybe you don't know about the they do know about the amulet, because the link was established during the brief period where Garion took the amulet off to have a bath that one time. So I don't know. But anyways, so there was that. There was the encounter with Mandorallen's acquaintance and his little bit of backstory there. And yeah, the Raven and Eagle stuff. What does everybody think about Garion trying to push his mind out to tag along with Aunt Pole? I don't know, like, it takes up a portion of a page. There wasn't much said about it. Mr. Wolf noticed, Aunt Pole noticed. Garion didn't seem to think much of it. And Dernick, sadly, being a little judgy. I mean, to be fair, Dernick is being judgy of something very close to adultery, like of things to be judgy of. I can't blame him that much for that. But on the other hand, the don't let it happen in the first place is a little judgy. Like, yeah. Sharky say he's had others poking in his brain a lot, so maybe he wanted to test if it goes both ways. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and he seems to be sensitive to people doing magic, right? Um, he always feels that pressure, and he kind of hears it. We don't know whether the others, whether Silk or Dernick or any of the others, really feel things the same way Garion does, but Garion seems to be able to tell when that type of thing is taking place. Yeah, he can hear the goose. Hack! He can hear the omen of magic. The harbinger of magic, the goose. Sharky say, also over the past couple streams, Mr. has had stuck in his head. Down at an Arendish fair one evening I was there, and I heard a showman shouting underneath the flare. The Arendish fair. It sounds like an interesting place, doesn't it? It reminds me of some SCA events back in the day. You know, you get some booths. I never did go to, what's it called? Something with a P. The really, really big SCA event. Penzik. I never went to Penzik, but I always, from what I had heard, kind of reminds me of what Penzik might be like. But yeah, just imagining just, all these tents and all these merchants selling, everything under the sun kind of thing. Seems like it'd be an interesting place. Yeah, it's spelled PENSAIC or something like that. I don't know. I don't remember exactly either. Or PENNS or something. But yeah, I wonder what it would be like to visit something like the Great Arendish Fair. Honestly, it'd probably be a little bit like the Richmond Night Market, only bigger, right? I guess maybe less cheap knockoff goods, but if you could visit any fantasy location other than the Shire, because obviously I know you're going to say the Shire, don't even try. Instead of I've got a lovely bunch of coconuts, Mrs. opted to sing Hank? What? Like I've got a lovely bunch of Hank? Or I don't understand how those two things are fitting together. Like I guess, if that's it, if you're replacing one word out of that. I've got the lovely bunch of Hank. Less singing, more honk. Well, then it's not. If it's just instead of that whole thing, instead of I've got a lovely bunch of coconuts, it's just Hank. Or is it like a bunch of Hanks? Is it like Hank, 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 Hank? Because otherwise, I don't see how they're related. It's like saying, instead of singing the national anthem, I Hank. It was what the showman was. Oh, I see. I gotcha. When I heard a showman shouting underneath the flare, Hank! I gotcha. Anyways, that brings us back to Garion can apparently hear that Hank, that whooshing sound. So he is at least, and we don't know whether anyone else, like, I don't know, whether the non-sorceress types other than Garion, like whether Silk and Dernick and Barrack, whether they can really hear it or not. Farmo says the showman was, in fact, a magic goose. Yes. An omen of ill fortune. Okay, everybody. Wow. What a way to end the stream, huh? Oh, boy. Well, I'm getting a little sleepy. So, I think I'm gonna wrap things up for the evening. This has been fun. I am looking forward to the next chapter. We have reached Vomimbre. So it'd be hilarious if Garion's pendant had a goose. Yeah, that's interesting. We get a description. A pretty we know what Mr. Wolf's and Aunt Pole's pendants look like, but Garion's just has like an unusual looking design on it, basically. Is what we're told. Garion drew out the silver pendant with the strange design on it. So I don't think we've really gotten any more information than that. I think when he originally was talking about it, like, it was described as being like very nice looking, but Sharky's saying maybe he doesn't recognize it yet, and Farmo says to him it looks unusual. To everyone else, big old goose. It's obvious to everyone else. It would be obvious to Garion, but he's had a lot of head trauma, guys. He's been hit on the head a lot. Maybe it's muddled with his ability to perceive geese. That's how it's manifesting. All those hits to the head, no more geese. He just can't see them. There's not actually any magic. It's all geese. Garion just can't see them. Aunt Pole and Mr. Wolf both just have flocks of trained geese. And Garion just, he can't see them because he's been hit on the head too many times. That's all magic really is. The will, the word, and the goose. It was a goose controlling the eagle. She sent a messenger goose to the eagle, and then the eagle got the message and flew up high and then came down, which was also actually a goose. It's all geese all the way down. We've cracked it wide open. The secrets of magic uncovered before your very eyes. It's geese. It's always been geese. It's all geese. Always has been. Okay. Good night, everyone. Have a good weekend. Watch out for the geese. I'll see you next Wednesday. It's too much. In space, no one can hear you, Hank. Okay. Good night. See you next Wednesday. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye. Oh, dear. Hank.